have thought it? We're not in Los Angeles. I guess that's a good thing. I think we have some excitement of our own here today. Those of you who have been in these classes for a while will know that one of my favorite lines is, "You can't make this stuff up." And boy, every morning I repeat that to myself when I'm mixing. I'm not going to tell you what it is. But I'm delighted, actually excited about the prospect of having our guest speaker. And I thought I would ask David Bisno, who is a friend and colleague, and who actually is a class member, who's known Mosen for many years, to make a brief introduction, and then we'll have Mosen speak, and hopefully we'll have a Q&A, and we'll move along in these last couple of hours of the program. For those of you who are staying for lunch, the desk just got word that they could take payment, so as you have an opportunity to go out and just sign for the $25 for the luncheon, they'll be ready for you at that time. So without further ado, David, if you'd like to come up and say a few words, and we'll get started. You can use this.
1, 2, can you hear me? Maynard asked me to take 2 minutes to introduce Mosen, to those of you who may not know quickly his story. Mosen was born in 1990 in the West Bank, Palestine, Israel, grew up in a refugee camp near the village city of Ramallah. Instead of throwing stones and rocks at Israeli troops, although many members of his family were either injured or killed by Israeli Defense Forces, he thought it would be more profitable to go to school and study. So he went to Birzeit University, which is the university in the West Bank of Palestine, and there, while studying, he met a blonde young lady from Colorado. She told him that she was a student at Dartmouth Medical School. He had no idea. Dartmouth, United States, New Hampshire, where is that? What ensued is they came together to the United States because she was a Dartmouth medical student. He came to Hanover, New Hampshire. I was teaching an Iliad class 10 years ago about Israel and Palestine. We were going to have a luncheon, Maynard, just as you're having. I had a whole bunch of checks to deposit in the Ledyard Bank for the luncheon. I walked into the Ledyard Bank 10 years ago, just about today. No, it was in the autumn of 10 years ago, 2015. I walk up to the counter in the Ledyard Bank, and there's this gentleman with a little bit darker skin, dark hair, but brilliantly glistening eyes, bright. And I said to him, as I have a want to do, "Where are you from?" And I'm 50 years older than this young man who was then 25. And I thought I was sort of like the professor, and I'm asking this young kid where he's from. And quickly he turned the tables around on me and said, "I'm from the most troubled land in the Middle East. Where do you think that is?" And I said, "I don't know, Iraq, Syria, someplace like that." He said, "No, I'm from Palestine." And I said, "How the hell did you get out of Palestine?" It occurred to me, since I was doing this class and about to have the last class about Palestine, I said, "Would you be willing to speak to 90 people in my class about Palestine?" He said, "I've never spoken to an English audience before, and I work here at the Ledyard Bank." Well, Gail Trotter, who was manager of that branch of the Ledyard Bank, overheard the conversation, and she said, "Oh, David, I'll give him the morning off. He can come speak to your class." So he came to the class, and as an introduction, I said to the Iliad class, "We're talking about Palestine, but wouldn't it be really good if we could all hear somebody who's from Palestine?" And I invited Mosen to come up. That was 10 years ago. You could have heard a pin drop as he spoke in somewhat of a halting English. Now it's 10 years later. Mosen has been to Lehigh University, from where he transferred to Columbia University. Many of you may have known the story. At Columbia University, he was about to receive his degree, given credits at Lehigh and at Birzeit University. His good friend Mahmoud Khalil was arrested by the immigration forces and taken away. Mosen had applied for citizenship, U.S. citizenship. He was in hiding during the weeks immediately after Mahmoud Khalil was grabbed by the ICE forces. He appeared, this is now a few weeks ago, he appeared up in northern Vermont in Burlington to apply for his citizenship papers. He filled out all the forms, answered all the questions, 100% signed the bottom line, about to receive his citizenship, when the immigration forces came in and arrested him and put him in handcuffs. He spent 16 days locked up in a Vermont detention center in Burlington. The case went to the Vermont Federal District Court. I went up there for the hearing. The judge released him to be only in Vermont or New York while his case proceeds. With that quick history, Mosen, come.
And I think his most famous remarks to date were, "Mr. Trump, I'm not afraid of you." Wow. So let's take a break at this point, and we'll take 10 minutes. You'll have a chance to go out and have some water, perhaps sign up for lunch if you're going, and then we'll come back. If you have questions from Mosen, we can take a little time afterwards, and then we'll move on to solving all these problems in the last 40 minutes.
She's amazing.
So I think we have a chance for a few questions for Mosen. Before we do that, I do want to mention that I think there is a fundraising GoFunding program for Mosen and his legal expenses and perhaps tuition costs at Columbia that is ongoing. Mosen, do you have a website right off the tip of your fingers or not? If you don't, if you send something to me, I will send something out to the class. I'm sure that there are some folks here who would like to assist in that effort. So I can attest, having been a member of the bar, that's that bar as opposed to the other bar, that its legal fees are not inexpensive, particularly when you're involved in different cases and when your objective may or may not be the Supreme Court of the United States. So I would hope that some of us would be able to participate in that. So, are there any questions at this point? We're not going to, let's see, wait a minute. So, here's a question. Are you under surveillance? Or would they be interested in what you might say to a group like this? So,
as you know, there is legal cases taking place. So my lawyers, the general rule of thumb is don't engage with conversations like this, don't speak to the media, and don't do public engagements, because the fear that this would carry in and come to litigation, which could harm the case in a way or another. So I share with the lawyers, the legal team, that I am not fighting for my case. I'm not fighting for myself. I'm fighting for humanity. And if there is a cost, let it be. I will be as careful as possible.
So we are also, just so you know, we are going to delete the recording part of the class where Mosen spoke because of this question, basically. We don't want to add to the confusion or whatever is going on outside of the room. So, Ross?
Could I ask a question about the West Bank, since I have a chance here, where we're all very curious about the Palestinian state, the West Bank. Some writers have suggested that the West Bank might become a Palestinian Silicon Valley, perhaps financed by Saudi Arabia, the United States, maybe Israel, maybe by Israel. Is anything like that possible, likely to happen? Are there high-tech people already? Is there anything like that already? Is there any semblance of it on the West Bank? What could you tell me about it?
If you'd like to respond to that. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to repeat that for the people online. Question, is there anything, or what can you tell us about development projects for the West Bank? I think that's the...
Yes, so that's a good question. Palestinian people are resilient. And as you know, what happened with the Jewish people are resilient as well. When you are faced with destruction and extermination and attacks, you start becoming more creative and more resilient, and you actually grasp more on education because you lose your properties and other chances. And tech has provided so many opportunities. So yes, the possibility of the West Bank to become the Silicon Valley is very high. There is a lot of Palestinians, bright people who attend universities and who can contribute. But the root of the issue is not only about the creativity. In the West Bank, there are 18 refugee camps. And we are talking about over 500,000 refugees in refugee camps. Nowadays, as you know, there is a big issue with settler violence, terror attacks by settlers on Palestinian towns and burning houses and shooting people. And there are also an attempt destroying refugee camps. So my aunts in Jenin refugee camp were pushed out about a year ago, and the Israeli army is destroying a number of refugee camps. So they're making refugees twice. And there is a lot of pain and loss. So the issue is, if we don't bring healing to people's pain and loss and the trauma, they may not be able to focus on creating more opportunities.
Yes,
When you first left Palestine, did you have a passport? Do you carry a passport now? And what is the status of your application for U.S. citizenship?
these are questions about Mohsen's passport. Did he have one when he left Palestine? Does he have one now? And do you have any comments on that, Mohsen?
The core of the issue is I am stateless. So I don't have a citizenship because there is no state of Palestine. My passport is a traveling document. And this also poses an issue for the immigration system. Where are you going to deport this person if he's stateless and I can be in danger going back to the West Bank? The other question, what's
What's the status of your U.S. application for citizenship?
they canceled the application. Yeah, I saw a notice that says that the application is canceled, so there is no status on it because I am in immigration proceedings for deportation.
Martha?
Yeah, I have one other question along this. When you first came, when you climbed the wall and got to the embassy or whatever, what type of visa did you apply for? Because so many of them are restrictive.
Yeah, at that time it was an emergency visa because my ex-wife lost her brother and I had to come to participate in his funeral. So it was a visit visa, and it was codified later into a green card application based on the marriage that we have.
Yes, Ann.
Last year, you spoke to David's class on whose land is it anyway? And you indicated that there were some steps you were hoping to take subsequently, but you didn't tell us what they were. Can you tell us now what they were, or can you at least say, were you successful?
I'm not sure I got the question, Ann. I wasn't.
Last year, David taught a class
Yeah.
called Whose Land Is It?
Yes, yes.
And Mosen came to speak to us then. He indicated he had some thoughts for how to proceed.
Okay. So last year in a class that David taught, there were discussions about what steps Mosen might take. Question, were you able to take those steps? Kind of where are you at this point?
Yeah, last year I was working on basically bridge building and building actually a movement that is an anti-war movement rooted in finding a resolution through international law. And the biggest challenge was basically bringing more Israeli students and professors to agree on the principles that we have. We've been building to this day. Before detention, we were still building while I am sheltering in place and doing, online meetings. And after I released, we jumped directly into it. So it's going on. We almost have a finalized agreement, very close to finalize an agreement where Israelis and Palestinians are agreeing on principles and a vision how to bring this resolution forward. And again, the vision is we start with 2 states, we transition into confederacy, where basically the states similar in Europe system, and the third one is we allow for the majority votes in both states on integration into one country so people are able to access the whole land between the river and the sea. So we are in continuous momentum building this and I'm grateful for bad times because bad times and difficult times has provided me a much larger platform. So the building is now beyond Columbia University and New York City, Israel and Palestine, because many other people are tapping into it.
Well, Mohsen, again, we want to thank you for all of your work and effort, for your wonderful presentation here. We will follow you and your situation closely, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you. Thank you for opening your hearts and your minds to receive my message and for having me. And I want to share with you that I feel so rooted because I am in this community, because I feel the love and the support. The last part that I want to share is we really should not surrender to the energy of fear. And we should be able to scan our body, understand when we are afraid, and to find ways to transform that energy into love and into hope. Thank you for giving me hope.
Thank you. Well, it's quite amazing to hear someone from Palestine, one of the most beleaguered places in the world for many generations, stand up and say to us, we should have hope and not be fearful. And I want to come back to that before we finish here today. We saw this morning that the president had ordered, if I'm not mistaken, another 2,000 National Guards people in, 2,000 here, 2,000 there, 700 Marines, and this is added to what is an amazing number, if you think about it for a moment, in Los Angeles. You know, we have the Sheriff's Department in the county of Los Angeles and the police department in the city of Los Angeles. If you add up the number of professionals who are available to be on the street, between the two, it's close to 20,000 people. That does not include the police departments of the 48 other cities in the county. I don't know how many more policemen there are, but there are a lot of them. So, when you put all these people together and you dress them up in gas masks and other paraphernalia, how do you tell the difference between one and the other? And the answer is, you don't, and you can't. There's no way, particularly when you're out on the street and people are pushing one another back and forth. This is a conflagration waiting to happen. This is a constitutional crisis, absolutely without question. Where is this going to land? I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that anybody does, but it can't be good. Governor Newsom is between a rock and a hard place out there. We have a city with more than 10 million people where more than half have an immigrant background. More than 1 million are probably undocumented. Many of these people line up every morning in front of the Home Depot or in front of the 7-Eleven or whatever else there in order to get day jobs to go to work and make a day's wage. Many of them have been doing this for 10 years or more. Many of them pay taxes. And where are we out there? What is the end game here? Well, I think the end game for the administration is, one, to take our mind off whatever else we may happen to be thinking about. That big, horrible bill that the Senate is, moving around the chess pieces to try and pass. That's one thing. The issues with the tariffs, which are not going according to plan. The problems abroad, the two wars which were supposed to be settled now, which are a long way from being settled. And we, I think, just read that there was an interesting group of characters out at Camp David who were talking about, well, we're not too sure, but apparently Iran is on that agenda. And what's interesting, maybe most interesting, is that Trump, who one of the first things he did in the first term was to take us out of the deal we had with Iran, is now backing into a position where we're going to be back in that same deal 8 years later, 10 years later. So, but really, I think what this is about is 2026. This is all about how the administration can ensure that it will not lose the House. This issue, this immigration issue, is the, outside of tax cuts, which is the absolute most important thing to the Republicans, the immigration issue is the biggest issue on the fire. In fact, it is the underlying log in the fire. And you'll note, and I think it's very important, ICE has done very little work, or they haven't moved into any red states for the most part. They're not in Ohio, they're not in Missouri, they're not down south, they're in blue states. They were in Illinois, they were in Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. They must have needed a vacation of some kind. And now, of course, they're in the biggest game of all, the biggest blue state of all, the biggest immigration problem of all. And I think that really is what's happening here. Tom Friedman wrote an article a few days ago which kind of piqued my interest. He talked about Trump's inability to plan or program, and I was reminded, I don't know how many years ago it was that I read, I was going to say first read, but I only read it once, The Art of the Deal. But I remember what I came away with, what struck me most about that book, aside from the fact that it was patently ridiculous, was that he told wasn't really a story, he explained basically how he ran his life. And every morning he would come downstairs from that fancy Rococo fake gold palace that Ivana had built, and would come down to the office. He never had an agenda book. He never had a calendar. He never had a list of people that he was going to call or that he expected calls from. He said he would walk into the office, he would sit down at the desk, and wait for the phone to ring. And that's what he's done his whole life. Wait for the phone to ring. The sad thing is, the phone always rings. And we are living through that now. Now, it's true, he's got a whole staff now. Then, you know, he had 3 or 4 people who were running around doing many different things. Now he's got dozens, if not hundreds of people who are running around doing many different things. Susie Wiles and Stephen Miller, and a whole bunch of other people. They are trying to keep him on what they believe is the appropriate track. But he's not interested in staying on a track. The story, I've been advised that if you think you've seen executive orders, you haven't seen anything yet. He's got an executive order for every day that's left in this administration, at least one. He doesn't even know what they're all about, but they're all in piles. And every morning or every night or whenever it is that he stops throwing ketchup against the wall, he picks one out and says, well, what do you think about this? Oh, everybody says that's a wonderful idea. They don't even know what it is. But that's what we're going to see. The first 100 days is nothing compared to what's coming. We have 3 more years of this disastrous approach to our institutions. Yes, but.
Well, I was hoping in this last class that we could talk about the last 6 weeks and do a kind of retrospective of what we, can, or not, do a plan or talk about what do we do next. We know what he's going to do. We've seen it for all these years. Is standing out with a picket sign somewhere going to solve this mess? Why did we lose it? And what can we honestly say about ourselves that we have to look and decide how we're going to approach it from now on in? Because he's going to keep doing it unless we can come up with some plan on how we're going to approach this.
So there's if not the question. Question, how do we know what he's going to do. He doesn't change. We know, in a sense, what to expect. What is it we can do? We as individuals, we maybe not as a party, if we're not Democrats, if we're independents, or no matter what we are, how do we respond to all of this? You know, we read over the weekend about the dissension in the DNC and the problems that are going on there. We see that, I mean, if I were to ask you, who are the 3 really important leaders in this country today, I don't know what you'd say. I can't come up with any leaders in this country today. Not a single one. Not a religious leader, not a business leader, not a political leader, not a moral leader. I can't come up with a name. Now, do we have good governors? Do we have a few people in Congress? Do we have people who are involved, who are important and who have something to say? I think the answer to that is yes, we do. But we're nowhere here. I say we, I don't mean Democrats. I mean citizens. 77 million people voted for what we're seeing in Los Angeles now. 77 million people voted for that. I think those people, most of them, would vote for it today. And what does that say about us? Martha?
But I think if we heed the lesson of what Mosen was telling us, is that what we do is not surrender to the fear, and what he's trying to do and recommends is that it starts on a local level, and it starts by both sides talking. So it's not an us versus them. That we have to live together and we have to try and come together and understand each other. Obviously, we're not embracing, you know, the draconian ideas of the Trump administration, but you can talk to individuals who are voters who supported him, and that we can work in our communities. I mean, what are you going to do? You're not going to go to Washington and, you know, chain yourself to the White House, but you can participate in local groups.
Well, there was a time when we had some pretty big marches on Washington. It goes back a long way. The Million Man March, and I mean, we had all kinds of things. And to some extent, in those days, those were, quote unquote, successful. They brought attention to civil rights issues, to other kinds of things that were important at that time. When is the parade? On Saturday? I'm confused. So the parade is on Saturday, I think. And we're scheduled to have all kinds of local, over 1,000.
1,800.
Okay, 1,800, whatever it is, scattered around the country. Groups of people getting together and making their views or their position known. I think, you know, that's a perfectly good idea. Is this going to spur a major move? I don't think so. I think it's a way for people to show their concern. I think that's important. But I think it's a very small pebble in the pond. I don't think this is going to send out big ripples and big change. Other comments or thoughts here? Yes, Rick.
The thing that has to take place is 2026 has to switch either the House or the Senate or both. That will make a huge difference.
So success in 2026, and I think we would probably agree that the likelihood is better in the House than in the Senate, certainly at this point. But that also assumes, doesn't it, a certain series of events. I mean, I don't know what would happen if that election were held today, or next week, or even next month. But I'm not convinced that what has happened so far is enough to change the momentum that occurred. I mean, most of the polls, for whatever they're worth, suggest that the Democratic Party is underwater, seriously underwater. And 43% of the population or voting public is now independent, and Dems are not doing particularly well with that group either. Bob?
I think even in an optimistic scenario where the House flips and/or both the Senate and the House, that's not going to slow down this flood of executive orders, lawlessness, testing limits, going beyond limits, court cases, and all that. We're in for that for the duration of this presidency, as far as I can see.
Well, I think that's true. I think that's the outcome of 26 will not all by itself, change the momentum. It may move it if the Dems, can turn around the House. I think the Senate at this point it's not impossible, but it's not likely. But I would agree that we're going to continue to see, I mean, if you step back for a moment and you turn on the TV, whenever it is you do, late in the morning, early at night, and you see those people out in California, and you say to yourself, Rodney King, here we go. I mean, it's going to happen. They've closed down part of the 101. Most of these demonstrations, and they are not riots technically, most of them, are in a very small area downtown, right outside the Federal Building. Not downtown, but it's not downtown, but it would be downtown in any other city. Across from the Federal Building, they're protecting federal property, quote unquote.
Yeah, but it means the population, the demonstrations are not interfering with most people's lives in Los Angeles because the Federal Building is removed from downtown.
Correct. Correct. Yes, no, okay, yes.
Just a quick one. Let me try for a touch of something a little more optimistic. I'm not going to go into a big thing on it, but one thing I think is a fact is this thing is close. The House vote in favor of the bill was one vote.
Yep.
The Senate vote is going to be close. We don't know yet. It's going to be close.
Definitely.
3 at the most, but 3 or 4 that they'll get, but maybe not that. We don't know. Kamala Harris didn't do that bad. She had a lot going against her. And it was not a landslide. It was not a landslide against Kamala Harris. She was in there. Your map, your good map from yesterday.
As opposed to the bad man.
The second map, which was the one I liked, showed how close this thing is with the R states and the D states. I'm not going to say anything more optimistic, but I think what I just said are facts, and you can kind of go with it from there.
Somebody else. Yeah, Ted.
I think that besides the fact that we have to act aggressively, but we also have to act defensively and work on really getting the courts to enforce the Constitution. And it's about time the Republicans find out what the Constitution really says. And that being enforce that, and then we start saying, guess what? It is the president's job to enforce the Constitution, and he is not enforcing the Constitution, and that's the person that you elected. Do you really want somebody working against the Constitution that you claim works so well for this country?
So,
I think we need to take professors
So-
out of universities and have them work on the best possible ways to confront them in the Supreme Court.
so let's talk for a minute about the courts. Every time we get I think the lower courts so far, in the last 6-8 months, have done a pretty good job in pushing back against many of these things. But as it moves up the ladder, there are places where the circuit courts, or in some cases, the Supreme Court, has pushed back. There were 2 decisions on Friday of last week that were shocking. I thought shocking. One was that DOJ could continue to poke around in the Social Security files and in our records while this case was going on. And that's just a horrible decision. And the other thing that's very annoying and frankly scary about all of this is that what the Trump administration is doing is they're bringing up all these cases on the emergency docket, or what's called the shadow docket. And the reason for that is very simple. Because if it's on that docket, it's not argued, it's not briefed, the decision is 3 sentences, there's no vote, and there's no opinion. What the hell kind of a decision is that? That's no decision. That's somebody, I got up on the wrong side of the bed, or I don't like the way you look. I mean, that's not a legal decision. We had 8 or 10 of these every 2 terms for Bush and Obama and Clinton, and now we've got hundreds of them, literally hundreds of them. And the court doesn't have the guts to kick them back. And what's worse is they are approving many of these, and in my view, setting themselves up for some major decisions that are going to be very disruptive. One of the other things that's not good about this, one of the most important things that a Supreme Court decision does is it gives the lower courts direction. It tells them where to go and how to go. These rulings are nothing. They give the lower courts nothing to work with. They send them back for a whole new round of discussion. You know, some of these district court decisions that are written by these judges are 300 pages long. They're based on all kinds of evidence gathering and hearings and analysis of law. And then these jerks send out a 3-sentence decision saying, just do it. What is that?
On the other hand, in the last week or 2, we've seen 3 unanimous decisions of the Supreme Court that were argued with opinions. One of them cuts back on the power of the EPA to require years and years of environmental analyses statements that they had no authority to do. And so, you know, the pendulum is swinging that way too. And they're doing it in the respected manner.
Well, I would say you're right that there were unanimous decisions, all written by the liberal justices. Each one was written by a liberal justice, which I found very interesting. Yeah, I think presumably, those decisions were quote-unquote reasonable. You're absolutely correct. There were, there was discussion about these. In my view, those decisions don't come close to the importance of these other matters. It's not that they're not relevant, they're just not relevant on these constitutional matters of speech and religion and et cetera, which I think are more important. And I would also suggest that as we look at these decisions, both the ones you mentioned and the ones that I referred to, that the likelihood, my concern is that the likelihood that the court will come back with a decision on the merits in these other cases, I think is pretty strong. In other words, I think that the court is signaling in a way that we're going to see some decisions that are going to make us unhappy. I would hope not, but I think that's true. Sugar?
Well, I hate to say this, but we gotta hope that all those members of the Supreme Court stay on the Supreme Court for at least another few years. We don't want, who to have to make another nomination.
Well, we've got an interesting thing going on between Trump and the Federalist Society now. Suddenly he's mad at Leonard Leo, who handed him, I don't know how many hundred judges, if you include the circuit court and district court judges, and now he wants to have MAGA judges, whatever that is. Yeah, I mean, he's in and out on this. Yes?
I think that what we have seen is that activism starts from individual issues, not philosophical issues. And that's what happened with our election, where the Democrats talked about big philosophical issues, and the Republicans talked about an issue that is personal to you. What we see now in LA is the activism is coming from people whose families, who themselves are being directly affected. And so I think we have to go back to what Peter Welch said yesterday, which is when you talk to your neighbors, you say, do you realize now that you don't have the hospital there anymore because we don't have Medicaid? Do you realize that you can't afford to feed your family because of the inflation from the tariffs? I think that it's a one-on-one individual issue that is going to create activism. And he also said that if you look at the polls, people do not trust the national institutions. They do not trust the courts or the judiciary or media, but they do trust locals and local individuals and their neighbors and local issues. They understand them. So I think that we should do best by zeroing in on the small vulnerabilities like the 4 elections that are coming and focus on local.
So I think that's an important point. I would ask, do you think it's easier for Peter Welch to do that in Vermont than it is for Senator Padula to do that in California?
But you're talking about national. I'm saying, what can we as individuals do?
Well, okay, I was just trying to draw perhaps a distinction between what is a smaller community, i.e. Vermont, and what is a much larger community in California.
Yes, but he has the ability to talk to the state like a small community, whereas in Florida, for example, you have to talk
Yes.
I think an easy thing for many of us to do that can be helpful at this time is to support the ACLU, Public Citizen, and other organizations that are fighting in the courts for us.
So there are a number of those organizations. Maybe some, and the ACLU is one of the oldest and one of the largest, and certainly one of the best well-known. So I think certainly supporting those organizations is helpful, either with donations of money or in some other way. I'm struck at certain times, if you're looking at certain channels, you can see in the space of 3 minutes or 4 minutes, half a dozen ads from the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center and ba-ba. So they are, in a sense, competing with one another, although, you know, they have slightly different lanes. They all do good work. Is that effective, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't know. I don't know how you organize your giving. Do these ads motivate you to contribute to these organizations? Well, you know, I tried to, in my own mind, to come back to something that would be more or less hopeful. And I have to say that I'm disappointed in my inabilities. I came up with 4 words: hope, courage, truth. What was the other one? Well, let me start with those. Hope. Are we in a hopeless situation? No, I don't say it's not hopeless. Am I hopeful? I am not hopeful. I hope some of you are. Certainly, someone like Mosen is hopeful, and I think that's very important. Let me just finish this. So, and then let's move on to courage. Some of you may remember a book, The Profiles in Courage. Remember that book? Written by a young senator from, published under the name of a young senator from Massachusetts. He didn't write most of that book. It was written by Ted Sorensen. He got the Pulitzer Prize, and Ted Sorensen got a raise, probably $20. And one thing you will note about that book is it's very thin. And there's a reason for that. Because there were just 8 senators in our history at that time who they thought enough of to profile. So courage, you know, it's hard today. Mosen is a most unusual man. We have other people who have been grabbed off the streets by ICE agents in black cars with no warrants and taken away, and literally some of them we haven't heard from again. A few of them we've gotten Abgobat Garcia back for whatever that might mean. And then we come to this, this question of truth, which is the one, frankly, that I think scares me most of all. Because we have become, we live in an age of mendacity. This country has completely been taken over by BS. We are the greatest BSs in the world. We have an administration that is based entirely on the perpetration of BS. They are now basically, they're bringing suit so that the taxpayers of this country can pay off the people who were sentenced for the insurrection. Who knows where that will end? We have a situation where every word out of virtually every cabinet secretary, I mean, we heard, was it this morning or last night? Bobby Kennedy Jr., God bless him. My God. 17 people kicked off this committee, this vaccine committee, and he's going to replace them with God knows who. And there isn't a single physician, not one, who's a real physician, who knows anything about this, who thinks that's a good idea. So it doesn't make any difference what field you're in. It doesn't make any difference, you know, even what side you're on. We've talked here about trying to sit down with people on a one-on-one basis. I think that's a terrific idea. Some of you, I don't know if in this room, I know people who have members of their family who they can't sit down with because there's no room to move. I don't think we've ever seen that to that extent in this country before. We had people who didn't like Roosevelt. We had people who didn't like Truman. We had people who didn't like Reagan. All that Bush. But we've never had the situation I think that we have now. And with the development of AI, it staggers me. It staggers me that there was a provision in this bill, in this BBB bill, that states could not make any laws that limited the development of AI for 10 years. I'm not an engineer. I don't know a lot about AI. But I know that that's one of the dumbest possible things that we could do. AI changes in 6 months more than most of us can even begin to imagine. 10 years? You know, these people down in Washington don't know what AI is. I'll bet you 80% of those senators and congressmen have yet to read that bill. They have no idea what's in it. They know that it is, they're going to get lower taxes. They're probably going to get this bill passed, and it's going to have a tremendous impact on our country. So I don't want to go on. I think I've probably made my point. I had a number of other things and stories I wanted to tell you, but I'll pass on those. I think every one of us has developed our individual responses to all of this, right? It started during COVID when we were boxed in for a couple of years and we couldn't do anything. And so we had to change our lifestyle, literally. We had to find things to do. We had to actually talk to our spouses because there was nobody else to talk to. So, and a lot of other things. So now we have a situation where you know, some of us watch a lot of news, some of us don't watch any news. Some of us may listen to music, some of us may read books, some of us may go for a walk, some of us may go swimming. Whatever it is, we all have adjusted in some way to try and limit the impact of this staccato interference in our lives. And as I say, I don't know how it's going to wind up. We certainly don't know what's going to happen in 2028. We don't even know what's going to happen in 2026. But I think what we're seeing out in Los Angeles is the beginning of some very serious questions about the role of the military, about habeas corpus, about the Insurrection Act, and my take is there's very little good news. And so I think we need to be prepared. And I think we need, those of us, and I think most of us, have grandkids and great-grandkids and maybe even great-great-grandkids. I think we need to feel for them because we have left them in a very bad place. So I thank you for your attention, for your willingness to come. I think I'm going to take a break from all of this. I think I'm not going to teach a course in the fall. It'll be the first fall in 12 years that I've missed. It's not a retirement, but it's kind of a step aside for a minute. And maybe a course on cocktails, I think. Carol?
Can you revisit the GoFundMe for Mosin?
Oh, well, I think what I suggested was the GoFundMe thing for Mosin. If you, I'll send out some information on that, and those of you who want to participate can. So, have a good day. I hope some of you are joining us for lunch, and thank you very much.
Thank you.